because there are problems such as packet losses, transient loops, and black holes. And as the data center is growing larger, the problems will become more frequently and they will become more difficult to detect. So we need better tools that can provide better visibility. These are joint works between USC and Stanford networks. We propose flow radar, which is a practical system that can track all the flows in the network and report accurate counters every few milliseconds. Today's data center have new requirements for traffic monitoring. We need to inspect each individual flow. Here we define the flow by the 5 tuples. For example, transient loops and black holes are common in data centers, but it is important to detect them because they may cause packet losses. However, they are difficult to detect because they may only affect a small subset of the flows, while the majority is working well. So we need to capture all the flows to detect it. Also, we need to capture all the flows to do fine-grained traffic analysis, such as finding the anomaly flows. Data center also require the monitoring to have temporal coverage, which captures the flows information on a fine time scale, say a few milliseconds. This is very important for short-time loss rate analysis and timely attack detection. Our goal is to report counter for each individual flow on a fine time scale. The key challenge is to find the right division of labor between the switches and the host and the collector. Switches have limited per packet processing time per stage in the pipeline, which is 12 nanoseconds per packet for fully GPOD. And it has limited memory, which is tens of megabytes. On the other hand, the collector has limited bandwidth and storage. Today, NetFlow maintains per flow counters at the switches, which put all complexity at individual switches. Packet mirroring tools mirror all packets out and use the collector to post-process them, which puts all the complexity at the collector. Both of them rely on heavy sampling to reduce overhead, so they cannot ship on the go. Instead, we build a system flow radar that can report counters of each individual flow on a fine time scale. To achieve this, flow radar leverages the best a switch can do using fixed operations per packet, and it keeps the collector overhead low by using a small data structure. We maintain a compact data structure to store per flow counters at each switch. Of course, there is no free lunch. The data generated by each individual switch are actually semi-finished. And we leverage the abundant computing resource of the collector to post-process the data from all switches to get complete per flow counters. With the per flow counters, we can do many analyses. Let's see how the switch works. There are many design choices to store the per flow counters. The most direct way is to use a hash table to store flows and counters, which is used by today's NetFlow. The key challenge is how to handle the hash collisions. One way is to reduce the number of collisions by using a large hash table, which takes too much memory. Or we can use the techniques to handle collisions, such as linked list, or using advanced hashing such as cuckoo hashing, both of which all need to visit other cells. So they require multiple and a non-constant number of memory accesses. Instead of handling collisions, we use a data structure that embraces the collisions, which require less memory and has a constant number of memory accesses per packet. This is the data structure. We call it a counting table. This is inspired by the invertible Bloom lookup table. It has an array of cells, and each cell has 3 fields. Suppose we have 3 flows, A, B, and C, and the size of them are SA, SB, and SC. Each switch has multiple hash functions, and each flow is hashed by these hash functions into multiple cells. In each cell, we store the 5 tuple of that flow in the first field. The second field counts the number of flows in that cell, and the third field counts the total packet of all flows in that cell. Note that if 2 flows collide in the same cell, like this cell, we will absorb their 5 tuple in the first field. This is what we mean by embracing the collision. However, in reality, the flows come packet by packet, so we have to update them in a per packet manner. Because we need to maintain the flow resolve field and the flow count field, which are all updated once for each flow, not for each packet. So we add another structure called the flow filter to detect if a packet is belongs to a new flow or existing flow. This can be easily implemented using a Bloom filter. Each incoming packet checks and updates the flow filter. If it is from a new flow, we resolve its 5 tuple and we resolve its 5 tuple to the flow resolve field and increment the packet flow count field and the packet count field. If it is, then the subsequent packets only update the packet count field. We call the flow filter and the counting table together as an encoded flow set. This data structure is incremental in merchant silicon because its per packet processing time is constant and the memory usage is very small. It only takes 2.36 megabytes to store 100K flows, which is far less than tens of megabytes available memory of a switch. The switch control plane gets a small flow set every 10 milliseconds, so the overhead is low as well. We have implemented in P4. We just showed how the encoded flow set works. After the collector receives the flow sets, it tries to decode all the per flow counters. The decoding has 2 stages. First, single decode, then network-wide decode. The single decode is for each individual encoded flow set. Let's first see how it works. The input to the single decode is a single encoded flow set. And after the decoding, we can get all the per flow counters. The single decode starts from finding a pure cell, which contains only 1 flow in it. Because it only has 1 flow, we know that the flow resolve field is exactly the 5 tuple of that flow. And the packet count field is the number of packets of that flow. In this example, we decoded the flow A, and its size is 5. Then we remove the flow A from all the cells it appears in by resolve the 5 tuple to the first field, decrement the flow count and the packet count. This creates more pure cells, so we can decode again. We can iterate this process until there is no pure cells. However, now we stop at a stage that there are still flows remaining in the counting table, but there is no pure cells. Fortunately, the collector has the flow sets from all switches. We want to leverage network-wide information to decode more flows. This is achieved by the second stage of the decoding, network-wide decode. We observe that the sets of flows overlap across hops, which means there is a redundancy on the collector. We can leverage redundancy to decode more flows. Let's use a simple and ideal example to show how we use the redundancy. And we will show the challenge later. Suppose there are 4 flows traversing 2 switches, and each has 5 cells in the counting table. If we single decode them independently, we are using 5 cells to decode 4 flows. However, if we use different hash functions across hops, we can view these 2 counting tables as the one big counting table. So now we are using 10 cells instead of 5 cells to decode 4 flows, which can obviously decode more flows. So our key insight is that the collector can leverage the flow sets from all switches to decode more flows. The benefit is that we can provision the switch memory based on the average number of flows rather than the maximum number of flows. So in the normal case, we use single decode to get all the flows and the counters. And in case there is a burst of flows, we use the network-wide decode to get all the information. However, there are challenges. The first challenge is that the set of flows are not fully overlapped across hops, because the flows from one switch may go to different next hop, and one switch may receive flows from different previous hop. Our solution to this challenge leverages the flow filter of each flow set. Let's see an example. The first flow set single decode flow A. Then we try to use the second flow set's flow filter to see if A is there or not. And because A is there, we remove A from the second flow set. The first flow set single decode flow B. And because B is not in the second one, so we don't make any changes. After removing A from the second flow set, there could be more pure cells. So we can single decode again and get flow C. Then we try to remove flow C from the first flow set. This zigzag decoding pattern can be done iteratively until all flows are being decoded. We call this process flow decode because we can get all the full list of flows in this process. This solution can be generalized to the entire network. We don't need any routing information because we use the flow filter to test which host of flows appears at. And because this solution works no matter how many switches we deploy, so it supports incremental deployment. The second challenge is that the counter of a flow may be different across hops. For example, some packets may get lost, or some packets may have left the previous hop but haven't arrived at the next hop. The problem is that when we remove one flow from another flow set, the counter that we get from this flow set may not be the right value for the flow in the other flow set. Fortunately, we do not need to get counters during the flow decode. We get the full list of flows during the flow decode. So we can construct a linear equation for each cell. For example, by hashing the flows we get, we know that flow A, B, and D are in the first cell. So we know that the total number of packets in that cell is 14. So we have this linear equation. And by construct a linear equation for each of the cells, we get a linear equation system. The linear equation system is solvable with more than n linearly independent combinations. By solving this linear equation system, we get all the counter values. We call this process counter decode. The challenge is that solving the linear equation system is not fast, so we try to make it faster. We observe that the matrix is very sparse because each column corresponds to a flow, and each flow is hashed to 3 or 4 cells. So each column actually has only 3 or 4 ones. So we can use iterative solvers to make it faster. In addition, we speed up the iteration in 2 ways. First, we can set the initial value for the iteration with a close approximation of the counters. The approximations can be got from the flow during the flow decoder. We can use the inaccurate counters as the initial value. The second way is that because all the counters are integers, so we can stop the iteration whenever all the result is floating around the integer. So network-wide decoding has 2 sub-stages. First is to put all the encoded flow sets together to decode all the flows, but with inaccurate counters. Then for each flow set, we solve a linear equation system so that we get all the accurate counters. Let's review the system. Each switch maintains an encoded flow set and periodically send it to a collector. The collector decodes the flow sets in 2 stages. We will show that the memory usage of the encoded flow set is very efficient, and the bandwidth usage is low. And we will show the improvement of network-wide decode over single decode. Our evaluation is based on a simulation of a k = 8 factories in Ns3. The operator can configure the memory for each switch based on the average number of flows. When there is a burst of flows, we use the network-wide decode. The worst case is that all the switches have the maximum number of flows. So we generate the worst case traffic by setting each switch has the same number of flows, which we consider as the maximum number of flows. We set each switch to report the flow set every 10 milliseconds. This is the result of the memory usage. X-axis is the number of flows per switch. It is in log scale. And the y-axis is the memory used per switch to hold that number of flows. We evaluated the flow radar's memory usage to decode all the flows. In data center, it is common for a switch to have 100K flows to 1000K flows in 10 milliseconds. For 100K flows, flow radar needs 2.36 megabytes. And for 1000 flows, flow radar needs 24.8 megabytes, which fits into the available memory of a switch. We also compared with NetFlow with perfect hashing. By perfect hashing, we mean that the number of cells is equal to the number of flows, which is impractical. We can see that flow radar's memory usage is very close to it. Actually, flow radar uses slightly lower memory. This is because we do not need to store the timestamp, which is required by NetFlow. We also evaluated the bandwidth usage based on Facebook's data center data. In Facebook, each talk has less than 100K flows per 10 milliseconds, so which requires less than 2.3 gigabits per second for flow radar. And each talk talks to 44 hosts with 10G link. So flow radar consumes 0.52% of the total talk bandwidth. We also evaluated the improvement of network-wide decode over single decode. The x-axis is the number of flows per switch, and the y-axis is the number of average decoding time per switch. We configure the memory in a way that we can single decode 100K flows. When the number of flows goes beyond 100K, we need to use the network-wide decode, which can help decode 26% more flows, with the cost of longer decoding time. More specifically, single decoding 100K flows takes 10 milliseconds, while network-wide decoding 126.8K flows takes around 3 seconds. We also analyze the network-wide decode, and we find the counter decode actually takes the majority of the decoding time. And the counter decode also limits the number of counters could be decoded. So this brings another benefit that if the number of flows is still too large for the counter decode to decode, we can only use the flow decode to get all the flows without counters, and the number is up to 152K. Next, we will show some analysis applications. There are many applications that could be built on the full flow coverage and the fine-grained temporal coverage provided by flow radar. Let's take a short time scale per flow loss rate analysis as an example. We test the loss of one flow between two switches. We set the switch to report flow set every 10 milliseconds. The x-axis is the 10 millisecond unit number. The y-axis is the number of packets during one 10 millisecond unit. Net flow usually gets per flow counter after the flow finishes. So it can only detect loss after the end of the flow by comparing the counters. One can also configure the net flow to report periodically, but it is on at least second level, so it is still too slow. With flow radar, we can detect loss much faster because we have the 10 millisecond level counters. In fact, we can detect loss after each burst of flows. We call it a flowlet. And as long as there is a 10 millisecond gap, we can detect the loss by comparing the counters. In data center, packets are sent in bursts, so we have a better temporal coverage. In conclusion, we reported counters for all flows on a fine time scale, and which achieve this by fully leverage the capability of both the switches and the collector. In the switch, the per packet processing time is fixed, and we use the memory efficiently. On the collector, we propose network-wide decoding to use the memory more efficiently. Do you have any questions on this project? Yep.
So regarding to the scalability, you said the switch can handle 100K flows with 2.5 megabytes.
Yeah.
So that's like you only decode on a single switch, not on like net decode. Right?
Yes. So for a single flow set, we can decode them and the memory only needs 2.36 megabytes.
Yeah. And how many flows do you typically see within 10 milliseconds on a switch?
How many flows? So in a data center, it is common to have around 100K to 1000K flows.
That's from a single server.
For on a single switch.
Right, but I think the Facebook paper you cited that on a single server there's typically 100K flows per, 5 milliseconds.
Yeah, in that paper they have the number for each host every 5 milliseconds.
Right.
And number is only 100 level.
No, like not that. That's at least thousands of tens of flows.
Actually, we checked that paper. We can, if you want to confirm, we can talk after the talk.
I'm curious as to how sensitive the system is to which hash functions you choose. And I'm like, do you have to choose them very carefully, or can you more or less just pick 100 different hash functions out of a bucket, and most of the time it'll work fine? Or if there are certain types of like certain collections of hash functions that would lead you to not being able to come down to a pure cell or something like that?
That's a good question. So you are concerned about the selection of different kind of hash functions may change the results.
Yeah. Or make it invisible.
That's a great question. We haven't tested on that. So the hash function we use during in our evaluation is using the mobile hash. So it is actually a good hash function. And we talked with Barefoot, and they are using some hash functions that has a great quality in their hardware, and they feel this is feasible.
How about the relationships between different hash? Do you know much of anything about the relationships between the different hash functions?
So what do you mean by the relationship?
So there's H1, there's like H1, H2, H3.
Oh, I see. You mean the combination of different hash functions?
Yeah, as opposed to only one hash function.
That doesn't matter, because actually we use the same hash function with different random seed so that it works.
But I guess this question, this is an important one, right? I mean, so with the choice of a hash function, are there any of the results that you presented? It has no bearings at all.
Sorry, could you repeat?
Yeah. So does the choice of the hash function kind of affect the results that you presented? If you try different hash functions to see how sensitive the results are to the choice of the hash function, or it doesn't matter whatsoever.
We have we didn't test different combination of different hash functions.
Not combination, but different hash functions to see if you get similar results or what kind of results you get.
We didn't test different kind of hash functions.
So, right.
Yeah.
So this is an important one. They choosing the right hash function for many reasons.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion. Yeah. And we are also working with Barefoot.
And you may not find the perfect one, but it varies a lot.
I see.
So you maintain the state of the. I mean, how do you clean the flows? I mean, how do you determine that the flow is gone? Do you have timers for maintain, or we don't maintain timers? Or?
Yeah. So for the net flow, it has a timer for each flow. Has a timeout. Yeah. But we don't have this timeout because we send the whole data structure periodically. So and every interval, we will clear the data structure and start to build the data from scratch.
Oh. Okay. You're taking like snapshots of traffic essentially, and then based on those snapshots,
yeah, right.
You take samples. So that's a lot of processing.
Yeah. How do you identify a pure cell? You keep mentioning, or maybe you mentioned it, but like, how do you identify when one of the cells is just a single flow?
Because we have three fields.
This one.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
In the middle is flow count. And
yeah.
If that equals to 1, that's the pure cell.
Okay. Understood.
So this is the first work I will present, and have the second work. So the flow radar, as we discussed just now, it is a general tool that can solve many problems, including the packet loss. But if we want to only focus on the packet loss, which is a specific problem, we can do better. So now I will introduce our ongoing work, loss radar, which can detect individual losses on a fine time scale. The losses are important to detect because they have significant impact. They can increase the tail latency and drop the throughput. So they may cause service level agreement violations and finally drop the revenue of the cloud provider. And it may take operators up to tens of hours to find the root cause and fix the problem. So our takeaway is that we want to know the loss as soon as possible. However, there are challenges. The first challenge is that there are many different types of losses. This is the pipeline of a switch. Each incoming packet will go through the input buffer, the parser, then match against a number of tables, then be installed in the output buffer, waiting for the egress pipeline to send out. However, there are many possible reasons that can cause packet loss. Like the table may be misconfigured, so that it drop packets, or even during the table updates, it could drop packet, because some update is non-atomic. So at the time a rule is partially updated, it will drop the packet matching that rule may be dropped. And table may have corruptions and drop packets. The corruption may also happen in the packet buffers. Corrupt the packet and the packet get dropped. There could also the resource shortage could happen in the buffer during like congestions. It may also happen at the input buffer. And the links may have gray failures, for example, like fiber contaminations. So it may randomly drop packets. With so many possible reasons for packet loss, it is very hard for the vendor to provide each kind of loss with a special logic to detect the loss. So the takeaway is that we want to create a tool that is generic to any types of the losses. The second challenge is that every switch and every link in the network may have problems. The TCP can tell us there's loss, but it don't know where the loss happens. And in today's data centers, they use ECMP to utilize all the possible paths between each pair of hosts, which makes it even harder to find the right location of the loss. So our takeaway is that we also need the locations of the losses. The third challenge is that we lack the details of each individual losses. It is difficult to infer the root causes if we don't have the details of each individual loss, because different flows may experience different loss patterns, and the loss pattern may change over time. So our takeaway is that we also need information of individual losses. Our goal is to build a system that can detect the losses fast, and we can know the location of the losses. Also, we can know the information of individual losses. And we want this tool to be generic to any types of losses. So we install meters in the network so that we can know the location of the losses. And each meter will generate traffic digest based on the packet it sees, and periodically send the traffic digest to the collector. We also include details of each packet in the traffic digest. And finally, the collector gets all the traffic digest and compare the sets of packets seen by different meters. And the difference between these two meters is the packet losses. The first challenge is how to choose the locations to install the meters so that we can cover the whole network. Let's use an example. Suppose we want to cover all the traffic from S1 to S2. We can install an upstream meter at S1 and a downstream meter at S2 so that they cover all the traffic from S1 to S2. Similarly, we can cover traffic from S2 to S3. As we mentioned before, the losses could happen within the switch, like the table may drop packet. So we want to cover all the pipelines of a switch. So our solution to this problem is to put all the meters after all the ingress pipelines and right before the shared buffers, so that all the ingress pipeline is covered by the upstream meter of previous hop and the downstream meter at this hop. And all the egress pipeline and the shared buffer is covered by the upstream meter at this hop and the downstream meter at the next hop. And because we put the upstream meter before the downstream meter within a switch, every part is covered. The second challenge is how to compare the sets of packets. Of course, we cannot keep every packet the switch sees as the switch because that takes too much. One can choose to use flow reader to keep per flow counters and compare the counters to know the number of losses. But the memory is relevant to a number of flows. If we only want to know the losses, we can further reduce the overhead to proportional to a number of losses. The key idea is to use the invertible Bloom filter, IBF. And the key insight that we can achieve proportional to the number of losses memory is that at the upstream meter and the downstream meter, we both keep a small IBF. And no matter how large the number of packets each meter sees, we keep adding it to the IBF. And when the collector do the comparison of these two IBFs, the same element appear at both the same packet appear at both ends will cancel out. And only the differences remain in the result IBF. So the memory usage is only proportional to the number of losses. Let's see an example to show how we use it to achieve low memory usage. Suppose there are two switches, and we put an upstream meter at the first switch, a downstream meter at the second switch. Each meter keeps an IBF. The IBF has an area of cells, and each cell has two fields. Suppose the first packet A comes, and it gets dropped. It arrives at the upstream, but it gets dropped before arriving at the downstream. So only the upstream will update its IBF. With each packet, during the update, each packet will be hashed into multiple cells, and we resolve the 5-tuple plus the IP ID of that packet into the first field and increment the second field. Then the second packet B comes, it gets through, so both IBF updated. Packet C comes, gets dropped, so the first one updated. Packet D gets through, so both updated. Note that it is fine to keep adding as many packets as we have. When the collector receives both IBFs, it will do subtraction by zoring up the ZOR sum of the corresponding cells, and subtract the counter at the second IBF from the counter at the first IBF. Note that because the same packet appears at both ends will cancel out. So only the dropped packet will remain in the result. So the memory usage is only proportional to a number of losses. The benefit of this method is that it's memory efficient because the memory usage is only proportional to a number of losses. In our Ns3 simulation, we use traffic pattern reported in the EC-TCP paper, and we find it only needs 10 kilobytes per meter to support all the losses per 10 milliseconds. Also, we can extend to support to collect more packet information about each packet. We could include the TTL of the packet so that it helps us to identify loops. We can also include the timestamp of a packet when it arrives at the switch. We need to tag the timestamp in the packet header at the upstream switch so that the downstream switch can use the same value for the timestamp, so that same packet will cancel out. Actually, we can include any other fields that a programmable switch can configure. There are also challenges. The first is that because we periodically send the IVF to the collector, so each IVF actually contains a batch of packets. And we are comparing two batches of packets and use the difference as the loss. Because we use the difference as a loss, we have to make sure that all the packets from one batch at the upstream all go to the same batch at the downstream. Otherwise, if one packet from one upstream goes to other batch of the downstream, this packet will appear as a difference when we compare these two batches. This is not easy because first the clocks of the switches are not well synchronized, and they may get delayed or even get reordered. Our solution to this is to use the packet header to carry the batch ID at the upstream switch, so that the downstream switch knows which batch it belongs to. The second challenge is how to support incremental deployment. There is time that not all the devices support our meters, so we have to treat those devices as black boxes. Our solution is to put one upstream meter at all the entrance to that black box, and one downstream meter at every exit to that from that black box. And the collector will sum up all the upstream meters and sum up all downstream meters and compare these two to get a loss between. But this takes more memories, so we are still working on this to reduce the overhead. The conclusion of Loss Radar is that we design a fast and efficient loss detection system. We can provide location and details of each individual losses, and it is generic to any types of losses. And the memory usage is only proportional to a number of losses. We're also working on designing an analyzer to diagnose the loss problems. We have many directions, like we can do temporal analysis, and we can also correlate across flows and across switches. We can also combine with the information provided by each host to do more accurate analysis. To conclude this talk, we provide full visibility of data centers by reporting all flows and all the lossy packets in a few milliseconds across all the switches. And we use efficient data structures on programmable switches. We have implemented both in P4, and we are working with Barefoot to show it is practical in their hardware switches. If you are interested, you are welcome to come to tomorrow's P4 workshop to see a demo. Thank you for listening.
A question about the batch IDs.
Batch ID, okay.
Did you implement the batch IDs? Yes. And if so, which fields of the header, or which fields of the packet header did you use?
We use the VLAN header.
VLAN header?
Yeah.
So, I mean, okay, I understand that there. It's like sort of like a poetic question, right? So, so obviously you cannot recover from packet losses unless you keep copies of the packets, right? Mm-hmm. So, and in like some cases you may want, for whatever reason, to keep track of losses. But some of the losses were like something in the routing table. Mm-hmm. I mean, that may affect some packets, but it won't affect all the packets. So I can see like some corner cases. So I'm trying to, sort of understand the value of having something like that running. And so the second thing is that when you start comparing the packet counts, I mean, the packet counts themselves can be corrupted, right? By memory mistakes. So that's obviously another corner case. And there are different losses, right? I mean, obviously, we try to prevent packet losses before this happens. When they happen, it's very catastrophic. It's too late. You cannot recover from it, right? So what is the real value? I mean, are you looking at, I mean, what can I do once I identify a loss?
I see. Let me explain your question one by one. So first concern is that there are many kinds of losses, and some kind of losses you feel it is not important. Is that what you mean?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying what I'm saying is that okay, I'm looking at patterns, right? So if I think that the routing table is corrupted, I mean, can I use that from that and say, and if yes, then what is the action I'm supposed to take, right? It's one thing to take something, but then it takes some action. So what would be the recommended action?
I see. So if one,
I mean, if it's buffers, of course, there's nothing I can do. The buffers fill up. You know, maybe you can find another path. But I'm assuming that before that happens, you have to look at other things like delays, and once you start seeing delays getting larger, then you know that you're going to be having a problem at some point, and then you have to drop packets, right? So we can take this out for now. But if there's something is corrupted in the switch itself, I mean, I'm trying to figure out, what is the real value? Practical purposes. Not from research. I mean, it's fine, but from practical purposes, if I'm building it, because I don't know whether you're working with perfect networks or not, but they're building, silicon, right? So what will be the value for?
I understand your concept. So when the table gets corrupted, some package that matching that corrupted rule will get dropped. And actually, in data center, this case happens very frequently, every few days.
Really?
Yeah. I was interning at Microsoft Azure, and they usually have to debug this kind of problems. And they are debugging by people manually, like to first TCP3 to see which possible path has problem, and to check the switch one by one to find the corrupted, have the problematic switch. So it's very slow. With if we can detect loss with the location, and you will find it's very likely to be caused by such kind of table rule corruption. We can just look at that switch, so it takes much less time to fix the problem. Does this make sense to you?
Yeah, it doesn't. It doesn't because I mean, obviously, it's not gonna work on my current network, right? I mean, we have all these changes, but I'm thinking that like been protocols in the past, right? Or if a switch is dropping a packet, they send a notification back to the source, right? And so, I mean, you can still do that today. I mean, anyway, that's some question.
So actually, to add on to that, for all these control tables, usually they come with a error correcting scheme rather than just error detecting. The table is corrupted, that means like more than one error has happened on the table. Which is kind of even rarer than once in a few days. Like having a one-bit flip is common, but having more than one bit flip is not usually common. And even in those cases, can't these happen locally? Like I know my switch has a corrupted memory because we can detect errors. And once I detect errors, can the software running on this switch locally handle this rather than going to a central agent or collector or wherever, and he's coming back and figuring out what is wrong. He can know this particular table is corrupted and fix it. So for cases like there are deterministic drops where you hit a table either the table is corrupted or a rule match and you decide to drop. All those deterministic drops can be handled locally, and all the buffer-based drops, like because of congestion and things like that, they are non-deterministic and they are temporal. And probably those things would be helpful to go through a central collector to see at which point in time my congestion has caused a particular packet to drop on a specific.
And it's exactly the pattern I was talking about, right? Because something is very temporal, very incidental. Obviously, you need to decide whether to take action or not, right? I mean, if you just like drop one packet an hour, for instance, I mean, so.
Yeah, and TCP usually catches the packet. One packet, two packets.
Yeah, in terms of the recovery, but yeah, so I'm trying to, okay. Looking at the health of the network and the health of, okay.
But the second question I had was, this is specific to, you just can't handle multicast flows, right? Because it's a one-to-one unicast, unicast source and unicast destination are only one type of packet drops or.
You mean for the modcast case? So if it is a modcast, we will install it into each So one switch for each output port, it has one upstream meter. Then we can install the multicast packet into each of the output ports.
But when you tally them up across multiple downstream modules with one single upstream module, you would need to tally them up, knowing that this is a multicast flow versus a unicast flow. Counters, when you converge the counters across downstream, the downstream meter and upstream meter, you need a way to know if it is multicast. You may need to tally it across multiple downstream blocks versus one single downstream block.
Could you repeat your question so I can understand better?
So in your collector, once you get all the statistics from your upstream and the downstream meters, you tally them up against each other to see where there is an excess and where they exactly match.
Right.
So if it is unicast, they would have one-to-one correspondence between. Again, the tally has to be 0. Right. If it is multicast, you're not. You would have more than one downstream module reporting the same stat twice. So you need to know a count of how many times the source has been copied over.
So your concern is about if we can handle the multicast case or not, right?
Yeah, I'm guessing if you let, maybe I'm wrong, but my understanding is if you actually include multicast counter, if you start counting multicast counters, you won't be able to tally it at the end because they will mess up with your unicast counters.
Seems like you need to know the network configuration because what he's saying is you will have one source and let's say 5 destinations. You need to compare those 5 destinations against the same single source as opposed to that one-to-one matching example that you showed.
Oh, I see your concern. So let me go to this figure. So we have, so the meters after all the ingress pipelines. So which means all the destination has been decided. So multicast, all the destination of this multicast, as the location of meter, we already know destination. So we can install them. Suppose it goes to maybe 2 output ports. We install them to each of the. So these 2 output ports all have its own meter. So we install it to each of these 2 meters. And when these 2 compare with the next hop meter, it's only the packet only appears once, right? As both here and next hop.
So okay, so what you're saying is when you actually this source is going to replicate it to three different destinations. So you actually add 3 entries in the upstream module.
Yeah, I add the entry into 3 upstream meters.
Even here you are making an assumption that all the multicast decision is made after ingress pipeline. Let's say if you have some span features that might happen at the ingress pipeline. The switch architecture, where all you can have.
So you mean the multicast decision may be made during the egress pipeline? So, from my understanding, that the packet, when the packet arrives at the shared buffer, the destination decision has been already made. So the next step is just going through the corresponding egress pipeline, so that at that time the destination has been decided. This is also, of course, this is from my discussion with Stanford networks. So this definitely works with their switch.
So just a clarification, does each switch then have multiple upstream meters and based on the destination, there is some central place where the correlation happens? Is there one upstream meter and one downstream meter in each switch, or are there multiple upstream meters and multiple downstream?
There are multiple. So for each port, it has an upstream meter, and then for each output, it has a downstream meter.
It doesn't have n squared meters.
I'm sorry.
It doesn't have n squared meters, where n is the number of ports.
It's n meters, not n square meters.
The 2 n meters.
Yeah, 2 n meters, right?
the majority of data center switches are not programmable.
Correct.
In these kind of data structures. I understand the barefoot is. So does it mean that you don't have a good solution for like all those ASIC-based switch chips?
Yeah, it is hard to modify the ASIC of the existing switch of the data centers. I haven't tried the Broadcom API, so I'm not sure if it's possible to implement a commodity switch. But as the trend is, the programmable switch is getting more popular. So we believe that this solution will be practical in the future.
In theory, your flow data could also be used to detect the losses, right? I understand it's more memory and more expensive. But,
yeah, you're right.
And that is not dependent on the ASIC or the switch, right?
So what do you mean? Depend on the ASIC.
So if you use the flow data, do you still have to stick with the barefoot switch or configurable type of switch, or can it work on others as well?
With barefoot switch is definitely incremental, and in today's deployed switch, it may be implementable because all the basic operations in there, like the hash functions, because the operation is very simple, right? It's only increment some field or loss some field and get data periodically. So all the basic operations there. So theoretically, I think it's possible to implement, but I haven't tried it.
Okay, let's thank Yuliang again. Thank you.
Thank you.